I've been a journalist for about 25 years, and I was educated to lie, to betray, and not to tell the truth to the public. Not to tell the truth to the public. Not to tell the truth to the public. Well, I've been a journalist for about 25 years, and I was educated to lie, to betray, and not to tell the truth to the public. But seeing right now, within the last months, how the German and American media tries to bring war to the people in Europe, to bring war to Russia. This is a point of no return, and I'm going to stand up and say it is not right what I have done in the past, to manipulate people, to make propaganda against Russia, and it is not right what my colleagues do and have done in the past, because they are bribed to betray the people, not only in Germany, all over Europe. They are bribed to betray the people. They are bribed to betray the people. The reason writing this book was that I am very fearful of a new war in Europe, and I don't like to have this situation again, because war is never coming from itself. There is always people behind it to push for war. And this is not only politicians, this is journalists too. And I just have written in the book how we have betrayed in the past our readers just to push for war, and because I don't want this anymore. I'm fed up with this propaganda. We live in a banana republic and not in a democratic country where we have press freedom, where we have human rights. If you see the German media, especially my colleagues who day by day write against the Russians, who are in transatlantic organizations and who are supported by the United States to do so, well, people like me, I became an honorary citizen of the state of Oklahoma in the United States. Just why? Just because I write pro-American. I wrote pro-American. I was supported by the Central Intelligence Agency, by the CIA. Why? Because I should be pro-American. I'm fed up with it. I don't want to do it anymore. And so I've just written a book not to earn money. No, it will cause a lot of trouble for me, just to give the people in this country, in Germany, in Europe, and all over the world, just to give them a glimpse of a view what goes up behind the closed doors.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment. Our number one enemy is ignorance. And I believe that is the number one enemy of everyone, is not understanding what is actually going on in the world. It's only when you start to understand that you can make effective decisions and effective plans. Now, the question is, who is promoting ignorance? Well, those organisations that try to keep things secret, and those organisations which distort true information to make it false, misrepresentative. In this latter category, it is bad media. It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad. We have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether. There's some very, very fine journalists, and we work with many of them, and some fine media organisations, but the vast majority are awful and are so distortive to how the world actually is.
About my experiences being the crisis manager, the flu commissioner for Belgium, and highlighting the communication aspects there. And then you have one opportunity to do it right. I mean, day one is so important. In day one, you start your communication with the press, with the people, and you have to do it right. I mean, you have to go for one voice, one message. In Belgium, they chose to appoint a non-politician to do that. I mean, I have no party affiliations, and that makes things a little bit, at that time at least, a little bit easier, because you're not attacked politically, majority, minority. That doesn't come into play, and that was a huge advantage. The second advantage is that you can play in Brussels the complete naive guy and get a lot more done than you would otherwise be able to do. You can play in Brussels the complete naive guy. You have to be omnipresent that first day or the first days, so that you attract the media attention. You make an agreement with them that you will tell them all, and if they call, you will pick up the phone. When you do that, then you can profit from these early days to get complete carpet coverage of the field, and they're not going to search for alternative voices there. And they're not going to search for alternative voices there. And if you do that, that makes things a lot easier. And then you have to say, okay, well, we will have H1N1 deaths. Of course, that would be unavoidable. I used there Sir Donaldson's quote, where he said that in the UK, by the peak of the epidemic, 40 people would die per day at the end of the summer. So 62 at that time million people in UK, 40 deaths a day. I worked it out for Belgium. That would be 7 deaths a day at the peak of the epidemic. I used that in the media. I used there Sir Donaldson's quote. I used that in the media. 7 Belgian flu deaths per day at the peak of the epidemic would be realistic. That is true in every year, even interpandemically. That is very, very conservative. However, talking about fatalities is important, because when you say that, people say, wow, what do you mean? People die because of influenza? And that was a necessary step to take. And then, of course, a couple of days later, you had the first H1N1 death in the country, and the scene was set and it was already talked about. And then you had to pick who is going to be vaccinated first. And then, well, women and children first, whatever. Well, women and children first, whatever. I mean, risk groups, they were important. And then I misused the fact. And then I misused the fact that the top football soccer clubs in Belgium inappropriately and against all agreements vaccinated they made their soccer players priority people. So I said I can use that, because if the population really believes that this vaccine is so desirable that even the soccer players would be dishonest to get their vaccine, I said, okay, I can play with that. So I made a big fuss about this. I can play with that. So I made a big fuss about this. This is Van Ranst is raving mad, but it worked.
correctly. COVID, gangbusters are great at this, right? Which is why we constantly have the death toll on the side, which I have a major problem with, that we're tallying how many people die every day. Because I've even looked at it and be like, let's make it higher. Like, why isn't it high enough, today? Like, it would make our point better if it was higher. And I'm like, what am I rallying for? That's a problem.
Yeah.
That we're doing that, like this special red phone ring.
Yeah.
And they pick it up, and it's like the head of the network being like, there's nothing that you're doing right now that makes me want to stick. Put the numbers back up, because that's the most enticing thing that we have. So put it back up. So like things like that are constantly talked about. There's no such thing as unbiased news. With any reporter on CNN.
Okay.
What they're actually doing is they're telling the person what to say. It's always like leading them in a direction before they even open their mouth. And the only people that we will let on the air, for the most part, are people that have a proven track record of taking the bait. And the only people that we will let on the air are people that have a proven track record of taking the bait.
We want to find a way of ramping this up even beyond the end of the lockdown. And I don't know when the lockdown will end. Some people are saying the 16th of April. But when we announced it, I didn't say what year it will end. I just...
In een opwelling heb ik toen werd ik gebeld en in een opwelling heb ik wel gezegd, luister eens, we kunnen ook Wilders premier maken als je dat wilt, hè. Dus je doet het via ons voortaan. Ja, misschien moet je dit niet onthullen, maar dit is wel een beetje hoe het gaat. Luister eens, we kunnen ook Wilders premier maken als je dat wilt, hè. Dus je doet het via ons voortaan. Ja, misschien moet je dit niet onthullen, maar dit is wel een beetje hoe het gaat.
That once the public will be open to it, we're going to start focusing mainly on climate, global warming, and it's going to be our focus. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
What does that look like?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have a feeling it's just going to be like constantly showing videos of like decline in ice and weather warming up and like the effects it's having on the economy and really diving into it. Head of the network, like just
Who's that? Is that Zucker?
Zucker, yeah. I imagine that he's got his council and they've all like discussed like where they think
So that's like the next
pandemic like story like that will be to death. But that one's got longevity. You know what I mean? It's not like climate is going to take years, so they'll probably be able to milk that for quite a bit. You know?
So climate change overload.
Be prepared. It's coming.
Do you think it's going to be just like a lot of like fear, like climate?
Yeah, fear sells.
Do you think it's going to be just like a lot of like fear, like climate?
Yeah, fear sells.
are you really shopping for this holiday season? It's okay, you can admit it, if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Well, it's okay. You can admit it if you have bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it. You've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it, Todd. If you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it. If you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you brought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 10 items for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay, you can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you've bought an item or 2 or maybe 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you've bought maybe an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
Is it okay? You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 3 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you brought an item or 2 or 10 for you.
It's okay. You can admit it.
If you've bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10. Say for yourself.
It's okay. Admit it if you bought an item or 2 or 10 for yourself.
It's okay. You can admit it if you bought yourself 1 or 2 or 10 things for yourself, because a lot of people do it.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.